Johnny Elsasser, welcome back to the podcast. Round two. Here we go.
Yeah, I'm a glutton for punishment, bro. No, I appreciate you letting me back on to serve your community and kind of hop on here and just have another conversation, brother.
Yeah. You reached out on Instagram, and I was like, hell yeah, I'll talk to you again. This sounds great. I remember loving our last one. The last conversation, I remember you were running some kind of an event where people could like shoot machine guns out of a helicopter or something. Do I remember that right?
It's close. Yeah. The semi-automatics and yeah, they weren't on full auto for the helicopter part. We did put them on full auto for some other shooting, but yeah, I was doing men's events down. One of them is in Corpus Christi where I was taking guys out, and part of that one was they get to go on a helicopter and shoot out of the helicopter at targets, which is a lot of fun, and dudes really dig that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's still stuck with me. I talked to you a couple years ago, and I remember this like GI Joe boot camp retreat experience, thinking like that sounds cool. I've never shot a gun out of a helicopter. But so maybe you can give an intro as to who you are and your background, so that
Yeah.
experience will make a little bit more sense to those listening.
They're like, who's this crazy, redneck out there just shooting guns out of helicopters? No. So, I'm former Special Operations U.S. Army Ranger, and then I used to protect the U.S. ambassador to Iraq. I spent a decade in and out of the Middle East between Iraq and Afghanistan, multiple combat tours. When I was doing protection, I was working for a private company and spent about majority of 5 years just living out of Baghdad, to be honest. There wasn't much time that I spent back at home. So that was kind of my life for early on. And, when I finally hit my rock bottom, that ended in a divorce and ended in me just really feeling lost in my life when I got back from doing all those jobs overseas, realized I had to like kind of reframe who I was and renegotiate kind of the man I wanted to be in society, because a lot of who I was in those environments didn't lend itself to being very much a healthy man outside of those environments. And it also didn't put me in the position to create a circle of men around me that were elevating me as opposed to just kind of keeping me in the same place. So I had to do a lot of introspection, did a lot of my own education and research into the men's space, started to do my own practices and self-development, put myself in courses and get mentors and things like that. And came up with doing the podcast, The Art of Masculinity, to start to really, try to help men. And it's really to help men kind of find themselves, find I try to be careful saying help find their purpose. I'm a big believer, and I write about this in my new book, Design the Man Within, that like I talk about the difference between passion and purpose. And I'm a firm believer that, any one of us can help each other find passion. We can help cultivate that, but passion is fleeting. And in that, though, sometimes you can find purpose. You can find something that you really do latch onto is like, oh my gosh, that's my purpose. But when I ask somebody like, what you need to find your purpose, let's talk about this, I'm like, you're not going to do that in 5 minutes. I'm sorry, dude. Or even an hour. You're not going to do that in a day. Like, that's something that's going to be so forced. It's got to be something that happens organically. So anyways, when I was creating the podcast and really getting into the men's space, I really wanted to help guys just find some authenticity with themselves. And then from there, like, it would improve when you're authentic with yourself. This is that like you're going to improve every area of your life, because you're going to start to have confidence. You're going to feel a lot of pride in who you are. You're going to carry yourself differently. So I wanted to create the podcast and then started doing coaching around, helping guys. And this is where I came up with my men's events, where I was able to blend two worlds together. I got to blend my abilities, my capabilities from the military and from protection, with coupling that with men's development. So what we did was we would create a really cool uber masculine environment, and then we would get guys into these real honest and open and vulnerable conversations typically during mealtime, and then in the evenings when we were hanging around a big bonfire. but it was just it's a really fun environment that I love being a part of. I like being a bro still. I like playing cornhole and joking around. And then I also like sitting next to a fire and talking about, dude, I'm really struggling right now with this area of my life, or my relationship isn't going well, or like whatever it is that I'm really working through in my life. I want to be able to have that community where I can talk with them. So I do love that. And so I wanted to bring that to men. And so I got that ability to couple my past life with my current life. And it's a beautiful thing, man. It's a lot of fun. So not just a crazy redneck shooting guns out of a helicopter, but that component got to be added in because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, not just that character, but certainly partially that character, I think is a fair
Yeah,
description.
yeah, yeah. Fair description. I'll take that.
I think it's important too that you highlight the fun aspect of doing this work, because I feel like the perception amongst a lot of people is that you go on a retreat or you go on a men's work event
Yeah.
and it is a sad suck fest and everybody's crying and hugging and reliving trauma, and all you're doing is having intense conversations. And my experience, running events, and then I attended one with Traver Baum, and my buddy Connor Beaton does this too, is that there is a bunch of levity, and it is a bunch of dudes being dudes, and laughter and lightness, and you can have fun while also doing the work. And so I think that is just an important thing to leave with the listener now, is that
Yeah.
like, yo, it doesn't have to be all the gnarly intensity. It can still be entertaining and joyful.
Absolutely. And that was like I don't know if you know Philip Folsom or if you've heard of him, but he works with Joshua Wenner on the K4 Men's Project. It's a really great community of men. And but Philip Folsom, he's kind of an elder in the men's space, and he went through the first transition of like men's development back in the 80s and 90s. And back then, they didn't, what you were referring to prior to that about like what people thought men's retreats and stuff were, was really what they used to be. So I think it's been ingrained in men to be like, oh man, come on, like that's not what I want to do. Like I get it. I know there's some deep places I get to go to or want to go to, but man, do I want to do that for 4 days and be stuck with guys on the weekend and always doing that? And that's kind of what it was. And that's why I also lost, my opinion, like 97% of men. I think that only catered to 3% of men that were already kind of in that spiritual space and in that shadow work space. But then 97% of men got left behind, and then the movement failed. And so I love hearing about Connor and Trevor, and then like a lot of the men that I know, we're trying to change the atmosphere of what men's work used to be that didn't really take and capture the average guy. And it's beautiful to know that there's other men out there like wanting to capture a different perspective of what development could be and how you can relate that conversation in a really cool and fun environment, and also have some of those aspects that allows these men to go deeper.
Yeah. I love just imagining you sitting around planning an event and then being like, wait, what if we rented a helicopter? And like, what if we got some big guns? And like, what if we took the guns in the helicopter and then did some men's work? Uh,
Yeah.
it's so good. So good. But I want to go back to, well, a couple of things. Maybe one that I'm intrigued about is, and I can't remember if we talked about this in the first conversation, but you living in Baghdad, Iraq, essentially doing very dangerous things for 5 years of your life, and then popping back into reality in America. Like,
Yeah.
can you just say a little bit more about what that was like?
Yeah, it's a big for me, I recognize the transition, and I'm able to relate with obviously a lot of veterans who have gone through that process, or are going through that process. And then I also can relate a lot with our law enforcement, because they tend to find a big struggle when they decide to leave law enforcement and go to the quote unquote the real world. I've also found that it's actually a very similar kind of mind transition for professional athletes. So I've had a lot of professional athletes on my show, and like they've struggled very similarly to what we kind of do. So even though it's a dangerous, ours is a really dangerous environment and theirs is just a very high level elite environment, the mindset seems to be very similar. And I think it's because the fact that we really do lose purpose, and we create an idea of who we are as men around what we're doing. And I think a lot of people do that in general in society, but there's no dramatic shift for them, which is why the transition's so much harder for people in dangerous environments or people in very elite environments. Is that we realize there's a shift and then that purpose goes away really quick. And then all of a sudden you're left holding a bag saying, oh, I gotta write something for myself. Like this was already given to me. I showed up to the military and they said, this flag right here, this flag, that's your purpose. Okay, cool. Done. I get to do that. Right. And then it's like, you get to a sports team and the sports team's like, hey, this thing on your helmet or this thing on your jersey, that's your bigger purpose, right? Like that team. Right. And so it's like all of this is kind of written for us when we're in those environments. And when we separate from them, we have to create that purpose. So when I came out of there, the transition for me, I was very vigilant, like because especially doing protection, I was always having to look around and watch and make sure I knew you could relatively assess with pretty good accuracy people's intent, right, or what they were doing. So I would constantly do that. I had a lot of judgment towards other, specifically other men in society, because like they weren't on my level of like vigilance and protection and all these other things, because I did this for a living for 10 years. So I'm like, okay, like I would judge them. So we'd have a conversation and I couldn't allow myself to be friends or get close with them to have another brother in my life, because I was like, oh, there's this guy's like, he's just a little weakling. Like he can't do anything. He couldn't save anybody or protect. Like he doesn't even look around. Like he doesn't even have peripherals. He doesn't even see anything that's going on. And you're like, so you have all this judgment that you're carrying around, and it prevents you from really connecting with people because they can't resonate to like where you are or who you have come from. And so a lot of that was kind of part of my transition as well. And then the lack of purpose, I really just lost that. And that's what created a lot of my downfall. Was like I didn't know how to write that for myself at the time. I wasn't aware. I hadn't done any kind of like in fact, I thought personal development was for weak people. I thought it was for people who couldn't handle their problems. Now I look at it and I'm like, no, they're actually very good at handling their problems. Like, so it was a very, very interesting conversation I had to have with myself. But during that transition, it took a lot out of me. And that's, when you go through all of that at the same time, this is why I believe a lot of us from the military in general, not even just special operations, but the military in general, and then from these other areas, these other walks of life, why it's so hard or why they start diving into vices is because we just don't know how to handle it. So we start getting into whatever recreational vice there is. Some people become addicted to working out, which actually isn't the worst thing, right? But some people, which is kind of what I did, that's where I went, because then I did bodybuilding afterwards, and that was really fun. But it was also, kind of like I saw that world for what it was, and there's a lot of toxicity there too. But then you get people that are latched onto alcohol and drugs and all that stuff, and it all happens similarly because we just can't handle what we're going through, and we weren't given the tools to do that. And so being from that world, especially always looking at everybody as a threat, like that's the other thing that I had to carry with me, that I had to really condition myself not to do, like wouldn't allow myself to get close to people, because I'd be like, oh, if I let them too close, then they'll use whatever it is against me, and then that'll make me vulnerable to them, and then they might take advantage of it. And I think a lot of men actually are plagued with that in general, but gets hyper inflated when you're coming from a job like I was. So it was a combination of all those things that I had to kind of confront after I got out from that environment.
When you were talking about that, I imagined us meeting just at a random like outdoor barbecue and like just chatting with you, and then and you just talk to me thinking like, this fucking guy has no idea
Yeah.
where the exits are. Like, he doesn't even know the highest likelihood of finding a weapon in this place. Like what a
Right.
like
Yeah.
Jason Bourne style. But something you touched on though, and I think at the core of that is this sense of identity, right? It's
Mhm.
like the foundation upon which we build our lives. And so for those listening that might not be a professional athlete or ex special forces, or the few of you that maybe are both, that would be amazing. But like mothers, their children go off to college, and suddenly the mothers and the fathers are like, who am I now if not a parent?
Yeah,
Or you get laid off from a job, and who am I now without this job or this career or this title? And that sense of lostness, because the thing which you anchored yourself to has been removed, and you're suddenly
mhm.
adrift in overwhelm and possibilities, not necessarily feeling secure internally or with your own self without those things. Does that feel
Absolutely.
resonant? Is that
That's huge. You actually hit what I like to kind of refer to as one of the biggest problems with people in general, is that they defer their happiness to an external source. So I find a lot of guys, and I call guys out on this all the time because I'm just like, when you start to peel away at the onion, when you ask them these questions, you start to realize they have no legs to stand on, and that at the root of everything is just a lack of belief in themselves. But one of the things that I hear a lot of people, especially fathers and mothers, is that like they say they live their life for their kids. And I'm like, okay, so when your kid's out of your house at 18 years old, who do you live your life for? Because that can't be your purpose. Yeah, your purpose is supposed to be lifelong, right? Like if we're all kind of in agreement that your life's purpose, we say it that way for a reason. It can't be your kids, because most y'all don't sit there and like live for your kids when they're out of the house, or they go to college and they get their own jobs and all that stuff. No, and so like same thing in relationships. I find a lot of men lose their identity, and women lose their identity because they become codependent, and that codependency drives a fractured relationship, which drives unhappiness. And I see that all the time as well. And so you hit the nail on the head of like a very big issue, because people lose their identity a lot because what they what they had created as a foundation of who they were was actually not built out of consciousness and awareness and intention. It was built out of subconsciousness and programming, typically from like the earlier ages in our life. It was built that time. So then when it gets confronted, it's easily toppled, pushed, and bowled over, when they get confronted, especially when you come with something like passion, infatuation, and love, right? So that ends up toppling it over, and there's no identity that you're holding on to. So like you said, now I have to go create this new identity. And most people don't know how to do that. And you're right, there's certain occasions whether it's somebody leaving a job, or whether it's a kid leaving a house. There's certain situations in which the average person finds that transitionary time that it does feel similar to what happens to, an athlete or a first responder or a veteran coming out of that kind of job. So they lose themselves, they don't create that identity, and then they really struggle with how to get things back. And then that's where the toxicity in their life starts to permeate from one piece to another. And so I love that you brought that up, because that is something that I think a lot of people do struggle with, to be honest.
yeah. And even if you don't necessarily struggle with it, even if you're content with who you are, in my experience, sometimes you kind of just get bored or tired, or you lack any kind of desire or excitement for continuing that. And it's like, I want to do something else. I want to do something different. There's more to be seen or felt or discovered, but I don't really know what that is or how to even give attention or energy to that process, right? It's like
Yeah.
the next
Yeah.
level, the next phase, the next thing. Um,
Well,
do you
yeah.
have
And a
anything to
lot,
say to that?
yeah, a lot of that, and to my belief, a lot of that is because the foundation isn't there. Like that is literally, our foundations are what form our intentions with our lives. And if you can't understand what your foundations are, then you're always going to fluctuate when times become challenging, or there's resistance, or there's adversity. Like whatever comes up, you're going to feel like it's insurmountable, and that even if it's a minor thing, even if you still feel like you're comfortable in life, there's something more. Typically, it's because you haven't truly aligned your foundations in who you are with how you want to show up in this world. And that becomes a really painful confrontation, because at the end of the day, some of these people find that that confrontation happens at like 40 years old. And they're like, bro, I've based my whole life on this. Like, what do you mean? My whole life's been messed up. And it's like, well, it wasn't messed up, but you definitely weren't living in authenticity. Like, and so like now you get that opportunity to find that. And that's where I believe a lot of power is. So I think it just depends on how you embrace that. And if people, your listeners or people in general, can embrace that with saying, okay, Dr. Wayne Dyer talks about this, instead of looking at them as obstacles, look at them as opportunities. And it's like, okay, if you can look at these as opportunities, then you get the opportunity to evolve, to adapt, and then to make something, to allow for something different to be in your life. So I think that's a beautiful, that was one of the first books I read was Excuses Be Gone. And that was one of the lines that stuck out to me, because I was like, oh yeah, I do paint a picture of things being bad or things being hard and this being an obstacle or a roadblock. And it's like, no, it's an opportunity. Like, it's an opportunity to show you, like, how do you get creative? How do you get around that? How do you adapt to it? How do you adapt your life or who you are to that, to make sure that it doesn't come up and block you from doing or being who you want to be? So I think that's important.
Yeah, you've reminded me of some quote or saying, and it's something like, don't ask for life to be easier, get stronger, or something
Yeah.
like that.
That's
Like,
a good
don't
one.
get better, because life might not be easier, right? And when you talk about laying that foundation, if you know deep down that you are capable of doing hard things and that you are strong and resourceful and have the tools and abilities, etc., like, there's nothing that can take that away from you. You're almost unstoppable in any situation, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Absolutely.
so then going back to this idea of passion versus purpose and developing purpose, and you said it's not a 1 hour deal. It's not a
No.
1 minute epiphany. Unfortunately, to those listening, or beware of those selling the seven
Yes.
snazzy, sizzling tips to purpose cultivation for 99.99 on Instagram. Uh, how do you? Gosh, I just had this visual of you, like in the Instagram ad, just dropping glitter and all the gold lettering of like Johnny Elsasser's 7 tips to purpose. Uh, so,
That's
so what is
my new offering.
your offering, bro? Your new niche. Um, what is purpose to you, and how does one find it or cultivate it?
This is a great question. And honestly, I haven't talked about it much on the podcast. I wrote about it in the book because it was something I hear often. Like you said, like you'll see Instagram crap where people are like, 5 tickets to purpose, 5 tools to purpose. And you're like, bro, stop it. Stop. Just stop. Like, it's for me, there's a difference, and passion and purpose look and potentially can feel the same, but they don't last the same. And I think that's the big difference. Purpose to me, when I think about that, is that every day you wake up, no matter how hard it gets, you're still excited to do it. Passion typically fleets when it gets hard, because you're like, this is a lot of work now. I'm gonna go do something else. Like, it's like, that was fun for, like, every single person listening can say they can remember a time where they were like, yeah, it was fun while it lasted. Like, yeah, because it was passion, it wasn't purpose, right? It was fun while it lasted. And for me, that's actually how you find purpose, is try out as many of the passions that come up in your life. If they last a week, 2 months, a year, whatever it is, take on those passions and enjoy them for that hot burning flame that they are, and then figure out if it turns into purpose. It's the only way you can really find it, because you can't just be like, okay, I'm going to go meditate this morning for about an hour, and hopefully I'm going to have the guides give me my purpose today. Yeah. All right. Thanks, guides. My purpose is to make shoes for turtles. Like, I don't know. Like, it's just like, it's not going to happen. Like, you can't do it that way. And so when I got into the self-development space, I'm one of those guys, like, I'm like, listen, I'm authentic with who I am. If I'm going to offer you something, I'm going to do everything in my power to be able to deliver that outcome. And I'm not going to just propose something to get your dollars, right? But I saw a lot of people creating businesses on this, and a lot of them coaches were saying, like, a lot of those coaches were like, oh yeah, well, you just got to find your why. And it's like, The swindler's way of trying to say find your purpose and them not having an answer for what you're doing and what you need to do. And so I was like, okay, this has got to be talked about, because uh I just don't believe it's something that you're going to cultivate over a very short amount of time. I think you need to have experience. You need to try things on and see how they fit. And if you've come to the conclusion that one of those things is something you wake up every day happy to do, even when it is a shitstorm of everything going on around you and it doesn't seem to be working, that can probably be classified as your purpose. And that to me is where I find myself today. Like I wouldn't say men's work was my purpose when I started. It became a passion of mine, and I knew it wasn't going to be super easy. And now I'm 5 years into it, and I'm like, I still wake up every day thinking, okay, what do I get to do this morning to move the needle to help men? What am I going to do, whether it's a post or whether it's creating a new freebie or whether it's whatever it is? I'm like, okay, how can I help men? And I'm starting to realize that if I didn't try it on, I wouldn't know that it was my purpose, but I'm starting to feel like it is my purpose right now. And who knows? Like I still would say, we'll see if it still is. But right now it's starting to have that feeling to it because of the longevity of it. And because it has been really hard, it has not been easy to wake up and go and do podcasts. Podcasting, creating things for people, trying to get people to realize that like you can help them in a way, and then like they actually probably need that in their life, and then trying to get up and do YouTube and all the other stuff that we have to do every day. It's not easy doing that stuff. It's easier to just hang it up and be like, oh, okay, yeah, this isn't great, I can just focus on one of these. But I get up every day doing all of them because of the fact that it brings enjoyment to me at the end of the day, and I feel good when I sit down and eat dinner and I'm like, all right, that was a great day, man. Yeah, it was kind of hard. I was building funnels today, and I don't build fucking funnels. Like I was like, great, spending like 6 hours on one funnel. And I'm like, all right, yeah, this is great. But like, that's not fun to me. And yet I still enjoy doing it. So that would be my conversation around passion and purpose. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too. Like, do you have something for that?
Yeah, I'm loving this chat, and I feel like this is something we could jam on for a while. But just to briefly, and I'm happy to share some thoughts, but if passion from your description is this more alive, excitement, fast burning, kind of like fireworks of glitter vibe, what does purpose feel like? What kind of vibe is it? What does it say? How does it land in the body for those who are trying to navigate that distinction?
Um, so I would say, like, I'm trying to put it in a tangible kind of logical term, because I could say I can go the energetic route. Like for me, I've done human design, and I've done work with a friend of mine who we were doing gene keys and everything, and I realized a lot of my power, if I'm going to be aligned with something, it comes from like my sacral chakra, right? Which is very different because that's below your stomach. So if you like, a lot of people are like, well, if you get that gut feeling, like, well, mine's not really a gut feeling. If it's a gut feeling for me, that's probably the wrong feeling. Actually, if it's from my sacral and I feel that it's lower from that, that's probably the right thing for me. And I've come to find out that when I get that, it's like when I feel like it's past that passion point, it's going to feel like this almost dull, long, like drawn out kind of desire in you to get it done, even though you're not like overly excited to do it, but you know that it needs to get done. Like you're like, I gotta do this. And you have this like pull, but you're like, I know this funnel for 8 hours isn't going to be fun today, but like, I got to do this. And then you're happy with it afterwards. It's not like this overexcited, I got to go do this funnel today, this is great. Like, it's not that. It's more of this drawn out kind of just feeling that you're like, it's got to be something to do, and I have to do that every single day, and I got to keep doing something that follows that drawn out process. That's what I would say. I don't know if that answers your question super well, but that's what I would say when I feel it. I know, okay, like that's starting to feel more like purpose to me. because I'm past the excitement, I'm past the spark, I'm past the glitter, I'm past all that stuff. It's no more infatuation. If we think about it like a relationship, right? Like, when did you know that you loved your spouse? Like, that's what I would say. Like, when did you know that you wanted to put a ring on your spouse? Some of you guys are gonna be like, well, I was in Vegas and I was drunk. Cool. Yeah, that's not it. But like, when did you know you were gonna marry your spouse and say, like, I'm dedicated to that person? Like, that is what you should be equating your purpose to, is like, when you start to feel that and you're like, I'm gonna be married to that, then that's going to be your purpose. But until then, it's like all the one night stands you had before. It's like all the 1 month dating you did or 2 month dating you did. It's all that, right? It's just, it's passion, and you just got to try it on and see if it fits. But you don't just walk. I mean, some people do, but you don't really just walk up to a person and just, I want to marry you. Like, that's not how it works. You try them on for a little bit. You guys see how it works, the compatibility. And by that time, it starts to turn into this, oh, I'm choosing to love you every day. This is great.
Mhm. I think it's a really powerful analogy, this idea that passion is sort of the equivalent of the honeymoon phase, when they can
Yeah.
do no wrong and all you do is have sex all the time, and it's like
Yeah.
they're the perfect angelic creature sent for me, and there's no rough edges, they can do no
Every
wrong. It's
every
like,
song is about you guys.
oh, it's the best. Like nothing but giggles and massages, and then suddenly, slowly, at times, it transitions into something deeper, more persistent. You start to see the warts and all. You start to have those conversations, and it settles into reality in some regard, right? When you talk
Yeah.
about an authentic connection or an authentic relationship with your own purpose. And I think for me, it feels like purpose feels like I can't not do that thing.
Yeah.
As much as I wish that I could avoid it, quit it, etc. It's
Yeah.
like I can't not do this thing. And I've talked about this at events that I've led. For me, it's writing, and writing is the purpose. For whatever reason, that's the jam. And I really despise that that is true on certain times. It's like, that writing is hard. Like,
Yeah, it
why couldn't
is.
my purpose be going for hikes or staring at animals or being a zookeeper? Not that there's not, difficulties and ups and downs with all of that thing, but
Sure.
I distinguish it like I'm very passionate about going hiking, for example, very
Yeah.
passionate about reading books. But that's not my deeper purpose, right? And for
Yeah.
me, I think the sweet spot is the hours or the days when I am passionate about my purpose. That is kind of like when I'm rubber hits the road, I'm flying high. Like, this feels good when I write something
Yeah.
great, when I have an impactful conversation with someone. It's like, oh, here we go. It's
Mm-hmm.
working. But then there's the whole other side of it, like a relationship, when you have to do some maintenance. You have to do some things that are uncomfortable or that you wouldn't actually choose to do if you had all
Right.
of the choices possible, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so, like a relationship, when you continue to turn towards and choose to do those things, even if they are unpalatable or uncomfortable, that is like a
Mm-hmm.
deeper commitment to something beyond yourself. And that,
Yeah.
I think, is also purpose.
I think that's a great way of putting it. Like, that was better than what I said. That was amazing. Yeah,
No,
absolutely,
bro,
man.
no, you
That
did
was
great.
great.
You did great.
He did great. He didn't want to say
No,
that.
no, man. I love these chats, and I love hearing different perspectives. And the relationship analogy that you just said, I think is exactly right. And
Yeah.
if it might not be when did you decide to marry your partner, but it's like, when did you decide you wanted to be boyfriend, girlfriend? When did you decide you wanted to move in? Like, there's
Yeah.
levels to the elevation of the dynamic, right? And so, to
Yeah.
your point from earlier, it sounds like try a bunch of stuff, see what you're passionate about. And if you keep continuing to do that, maybe it will evolve into purpose. Is that a fair
Yeah.
description?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, like, even some days when it's hard and you're like, I really wish it wasn't writing. I still got to write today. I got to write something because I got to get it out of me, and I like doing it. And like, for me, I was I love how you said when the passion aligns with purpose, because I don't think that's when people a lot of people talk about that. I think you hit something really cool there, because when you said that, it immediately went to when I'm speaking in front of like groups of men, or when I'm, talking on a podcast, or when I'm leading a training for men and stuff like that. Like, I feel that passion and purpose connect, because I'm so aligned with wanting to get this information out to guys to just help them improve their lives. And so that's why I think when you noted that, that's a really powerful thing. That's when you're at your, I mean, there's like, my opinion is that there's almost like no drug that's going to make you feel as good as that does, because your soul is fulfilled at that point. And it's not just like a quick high. It's like this long lasting fulfillment that you're like, dude, this sticks around. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah. One way I've described that to myself first, but then also to others, is because I was trying to kind of reverse engineer that feeling, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not a frequent thing in my experience. It happens once in a while. If you're fortunate, you can design your life to cater to more of these things. I was like, what is this? Like, why do I love this so much right now? And I realized that I was exactly where I was supposed to be in that moment, doing
Mm-hmm.
exactly what I'm supposed to do. And it was like crystal clear that right here, right now, like I would be nowhere else. I am exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing what I'm supposed to do. And like, holy moly, it feels freaking great. And so if you identify your purpose as being, I want to help men, or I want to save the animals, like that's amazing. And there's 100 or 1,000 different routes to get you to that purpose. It might be writing, speaking, public workshops, podcasts, YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
trying to align the things that you're passionate with on top of the deeper purpose gives you those moments that you described there of like, yo, put me on a stage in front of a bunch of guys and I am lit up. It is expressive,
Yeah.
magnetic, like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And then the impact, of course, correlates to that. And the impact is like fire and fierce and positive.
Yeah. When you said that, I was imagining, you ever watch Old School, the movie
Oh,
Old
bro,
School?
come on. Who
Yeah.
do you think I am? Yeah. You're my boy,
Well,
Blue.
I just want to make sure. I just want, because it reminded me of that scene. So like, here, we'll do our last connection to purpose right here. You remember when Will Ferrell was doing the debate, and he just spews out a bunch of stuff, and he's like, I'm sorry, I blacked out. What happened? And everybody's like cheering for him. That's when you know it's purpose, when you just black out and you channel it.
I love this so much that somehow you worked that into a profound discourse around passion and purpose. It's that, yeah. It's like I left my body. I'm not even me. I'm just channeling the divine. I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. Yes. Thank
Think Will
goodness for that.
Ferrell, Old School.
Now I'm gonna have to put that clip in the show notes for people. Um,
It'd be
I
so
get,
good.
yeah, Johnny. I guess I'll rewatch Old School for the 900th time and find that. Okay, so let's get, let me attempt to get this back on track. So, not that we're off track, but I want to hear more about your book and this idea of designing a life. And so we've touched upon many of the foundational ideals, right, around choice, identity, responsibility, purpose, passion, etc. So you've got a new book out. Is it your first book? Is it like
Yeah, it
your
is the first one. Yep. Yeah, the
nice?
flagship.
Congrats, man.
Thank you.
So maybe can you talk me through it? What's the summary? What's in there? What's it about?
Yeah. So we've already actually talked a little bit about some of what's going on in there. Passion and purpose are things that I discuss in there for people. It's a book. It's called Design the Man Within. And, I realized when I went through my journey that I had to get very intentional, because there was a lot of things that I loved about who I was, and there was a lot of strength built around that man. But I had to come to terms with some of that was not serving me in my life, to be connected with other human beings, to allow other people to see me, to have deeper relationships, and to just actually look at myself in the mirror and love who I was. And so I was like, okay, like I got to have a rough conversation here. So Design the Man Within came around because the fact that I also have done a lot of research into Dr. Bruce Lipton and Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, so epigenetics, and then how we can rewire the brain and all those things. And you think about how we started, and a lot of where we all started as human beings, to no fault of our own, was written by subconscious programming from earlier years of influence, whether it was words, actions, and people and TV, all these things, they played roles in our lives to develop a whole subconscious underlayer of who we are today. And so part of it was I wanted us to address this in a way that was, I would say, relatable to the real, like, everyday life. And so for men, I wanted to relate all of this in a way that said, hey, here's the conversations I know most of you guys are going through in your head. Here are some of the actions I know most of you guys have every day, because I did all this stuff. I grew up from a blue collar family. I grew up in a man's, like, manly men kind of world, all that stuff. Played sports my whole life. I was in an alpha environment, being an alpha myself, like all of that stuff. Like, I lived this life. I know what we're conversing about internally, and I know what we're saying externally, right? And I know what we're doing externally, but I know how we're feeling internally. So, like, I knew all this stuff, and I was like, well, if we're going to get guys to be intentional about how they live their life, we need to kind of throw a wrench in this and say, hey guys, I know this is what's happening. I know why it's not serving you. So let's have that conversation now. So I made a bunch of chapters, 19 to be exact, to go over a lot of the things that we struggle with, and then address those, not only by letting guys know I've been there and where in my life that showed up, but the conversations that I was having then, and the conversations I needed to have to get past those, and some of the tools I used to get past them, to then enhance my life and make it fulfilling and make myself, a happier, joyful person, to where I'm waking up every day, not in negativity or thinking what's going to go wrong or all the bullshit I have to do. It's about, like, what I get to do. It's about waking up and actually feeling excited to go meditate for a little bit for myself before I start my day, and get into my day and do something that it's like, do I really want to do this? But I know I got to do it. Like, getting to that point, um, in my life was very powerful. So I wanted to give guys that. So the book is really centered around that. It's for the everyday guy. And it helps everyday men find a door to development. So maybe guys listening haven't really, like, they might listen to your podcast, but they haven't opened a book or listened to somebody's training on it or hired a mentor or anything. Like, maybe they just haven't taken, like, that first foot through the door, right? Hopefully this book will give them that first foot through the door and make it very relatable. Because the other thing I was trying to solve was, I didn't, and I can't say I've read every men's book. I've read a lot, but for the most part, there's not really a guy's book that I have found in the men's development space that gets them through to more of the esoteric views that some of these other people have put out, that I feel are very powerful, but can't relate to the everyday guy. So I felt that most of the books either kept guys in the past in a way of being a man that isn't complete or whole or well-rounded or adaptable. And then I found the other books to be too esoteric and spiritual. So guys in the middle are like, bro, I don't like where I don't relate with this guy. And this guy over here, like, I can imagine what he's saying is not right. Like, I can't be that way still, right? This is causing the problems in my life. So I wanted to give a book that kind of was different from that. And I hope that this translate that to guys. So it goes over a lot of different things, from that passion to purpose. It goes over kind of the foundations of men and masculinity, or at least what I've gathered information around. And obviously I still, have that running conversation in my head to continue to adapt. But it goes over how guys can get rid of that martyrdom, like we talked about a little bit, when they defer their life to external forces, whether it's your kids, it could be justified, right? Like, you could feel that that's very justified, but at the end of the day, you sacrifice your happiness for something else that, you could actually show them your happiness, which is even more powerful, right? And so I go into a lot of that stuff, and It's I go into another chapter that I love, which was the victim and the assailant, because we have a lot of victim mentality in our lives, but we're also the assailant as well. We are the person who's creating us to be the victim through a lot of different modalities. And so I want people to realize like we can move past that, and especially men, because we're our worst critics. So I wrote that chapter specifically kind of going around that. But it was to bring a light to a lot of this stuff, and hopefully guys will see that. Hopefully it'll give them an entrance to that self-development, that men's development space, and then from there they can take it and hopefully find other ways to continue to grow, but at least that door got opened.
I love too that it's just an empowering title, like Design the Man Within. It's like,
Yeah.
yo, you have agency, you have ability, there are options here.
Yep.
Curious if women will benefit from reading your book.
I was actually going to say this, and then I stopped and I was like, shit, I didn't say that. And then yeah, it was great. We just transferred energy right now. Like, it was great. Yeah. So it's so funny because I don't like it. I think part of the reason I don't like to say that is because everybody says that for everybody. Oh, women will enjoy this too. It's like to get extra sales, right? But my wife read this and she's like, oh, this is amazing, because the fact that like there's a lot of principles in here that are valuable, and it helps women, it helps me understand you. And she's like, it helps women understand men better. And I was like, I guess you're right, because it is about the real conversations we're having. I'm not hiding anything in there. Everything in there I talk about is like stuff that's gone through my head or I've dealt with personally in my life. And I know for a fact a lot of men have done the same, or they have those running conversations. So for women, I found that it's helping women just to understand their partners a little better. And so they can become better supporters to them, or understand like when they got to remember that we have feelings. You know, my wife said that to me one time. She's like, yeah, sometimes I forget you have feelings. I'm like, no shit. Yeah, we're not robots. Like, as much as, and to her credit, as much as we want them to believe we're robots, right? Or we're these stoic stone men, we're not. And we have feelings, and we want to be loved, and we want to be cared for in certain instances. And we want to have that like loving touch. And so it does help women really understand that. And I think to me, that's really powerful, because um, if women can do that, then they can not feel as frustrated or lost with their partners, or like trying to figure out what's going on. Because again, the women's credit, guys don't share very well about what's going on because we're taught not to. And so hopefully this book can give women a little bit more ability to give some grace to the partners in their lives, and then also lend them a little bit more support, not because they don't want to, just because they don't know.
Yeah, I love that. And I had my buddy Connor Beaton on the podcast, and he said something similar of like, I've been getting a lot of notes from women saying, oh, this is very helpful to understand how men operate and how men think. And you're essentially getting an inside view of what it's like to be a man. And it sounds like that's what your book is about too. And I flashed to it when you were describing that. I flashed to this little bonfire on the river that we had a couple months ago, and me and I think two or three other guys were just throwing rocks, trying to hit like a big rock, and we were like, man, we were into it. It was like the best thing we'd ever seen. And at some point, I think we joked like, why is this such a like a guy thing to just love throwing rocks? And there's a bunch of our partners there watching it and like seeing our excitement and in our enthusiasm. And I think that sometimes men can be put in these boxes or these caricaturized versions of humans of, oh, they throw rocks and they lift heavy stuff and they forget to put the toilet down, and there's these robotic, nincompoops. But I think we forget our hearts and our feelings and our emotions to the detriment of all of us. And it sounds like your book is doing a huge service in trying to put a stake in the ground that, yeah, we throw rocks, but also like we have heartache and we have feelings, and we are human beings too.
Yeah, absolutely. And the big idea is to get guys to realize that again, because we're taught to stifle that as well, and women don't understand it. And if we can open up again to ourselves to really be able to allow that side to come out, that vulnerable side or that open side, and all the different emotions to be recognized within us, then we can figure out that we can soften up too. And then that's just the betterment of our relationships and to the betterment of being authentic to who we are. So yeah.
Amen. And the book's not out yet, right? Or is it out?
So it'll be released May 16th. So depending on when this will be out, it'll be either open for pre-order at designthemanwithin.com, or it'll be available for purchase on the same website. So yeah.
Cool. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I'll put a link to your Instagram account, your
Yeah,
podcast,
brother.
anywhere else
Appreciate
people
that.
can find you, or you want to drive them?
Yeah, I mean, just the website, if you guys that you can find everything there, so everything will be linked there. So if you just want one place to go to johnnyelsasser.com.
Yeah.
That has everything. You can find LinkedIn, you can find my YouTube channel, you can find Instagram. All that stuff is kind of connected to that. So yeah, absolutely, brother.
Will the website have your new gold-plated glitter infused passion to purpose
My
four,
7 steps.
7-step challenge for $49.97?
Yeah, yeah. My 7-day challenge to find your purpose. I'm a
Yeah.
guru, guys. Yeah, we got this going on. 7 steps.
Yeah, I mean, if you're
Oh,
listening, Johnny has a big beard. Looks like he's got a man bun out the back. I feel like you're training for this. Yeah.
yeah. Find
Well,
your purpose in your golden chariot.
the golden chariot, Johnny's golden chariot. That's it, man. That's the new Instagram
Yeah,
handle. But
my
thank you.
purpose.
Thanks for your heart. Thanks for all you do, and also thanks for your service all those years ago. And I just really appreciate the work that you're doing. And it is also really refreshing to hear a kind of like a feel good story from a former military person who is like creating big ripples and big positives, because I feel like in the media we often focus on the negatives and the
Mm,
alcoholism and the addiction and the suicides and the violence. And um, I know that you're doing some really good stuff here, and I just want to say, like, I'm proud of you, and thank you on behalf of all of us. So it's cool to
thanks,
see.
brother. It means a lot. Thank you.
Come back anytime, bro. We got to knock some more books out.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna have you on. All your listeners need to hold you accountable.
I
So
know.
Jeremy's gonna have a book coming out soon, right? And we'll have to have Jeremy back over on the Art of Masculinity so we can push his book out to everybody once he gets that ready to go.
Yeah, thank you for making me squirm at the very end of the conversation. Yeah,
Absolutely.
true. Thank you, brother. Talk soon.
Yeah, brother.